Good day. Welcome to the Strong Ambition Podcast. We're going to dive into training and nutrition to improve dad-bods with Dane Palarino. Dane himself was a self-proclaimed dad-bod. He said he was quite pear-shaped. He initially used to work for his own headhunting seven-figure business, and from there he found himself very successful financially, but not mentally and emotionally. He said he was waking up not inspired, not engaged in the world. And then he finally dusted off these two 25-pound dumbbells that he said were way heavier than he thought they were. And he did his own research, and then he sculpted his own body. And from there, he decided to be inspired and help other dad bods sculpt their bodies. And now he has a system of 5 pillars of fitness and health that will transform your life. And we dive into it. We dive into his 5 pillars of health. We talk about how men over the age of 30 can improve their metabolism, improve their training. And we talk about the systems that he uses within his program. And we also talk about myths and the things that people are really getting wrong, why fasting isn't a great tool for everyone. So there's a lot in this information. If you're someone over the age of 35 that wants to improve their health long-term, I think there's going to be a ton of great information for you. Without further ado, here is Dane Palarino. Good day, Dane. Thank you so much for being here today. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, brother. How are you?
I'm swell, thank you. So this is really cool to meet you, and let's just dive into your story because it's the first time we're meeting, and I think you got a pretty cool story. So why don't you tell the listeners who you are and how you got to doing what you're doing today?
Yeah, so my name is Dane Palarino. I'm the founder of Dad-bod Sculptors, which is an online coaching platform for men over 35. Really simplifies the complicated process of finding a system to scale their health and fitness. I got into this mainly because I was a prior world-class dad-bod owner, meaning that I had 2 children, a wife, and a thriving business, and I'd completely let go of my health and fitness. Even though I was training 1 hour a day, kind of checking the box and eating healthy, I did not look like it. I had accumulated a body that looked closer to a pear than an aesthetic physique. So at some point, I had recognized that by looking at a picture of myself and said, something's wrong here. I'm fasting 16 hours a day. I'm eating healthy. I'm training for 60 minutes a day, doing intense HIIT style training, and I do not look the part. And I had realized that by not looking the part over the last year and a half, 2 years of my life, that I was no longer happy. And I should have been happy because I had 2 beautiful kids that were healthy and waited my whole life to have a wife and a beautiful home, and I was leading a family. But I wasn't happy. I wasn't excited to get out of the bed in the morning. And I couldn't figure out why. And then when I saw a picture of myself in a transformation contest and I saw the way that I actually looked, I was angry. And I decided that I needed to do something about it. So I went on this journey of personal development to figure out how do I optimize the little bit of time that I had to invest in myself for training and finding strategies that were going to work for me as I was over the age of 40 at the time. So I was 41. And so I went deep into this process of understanding what's the optimal style of training for men over 35, what's the optimal style of nutrition, and then how do I incorporate that into my busy lifestyle so that it becomes sustainable. Because at that point in time, Ryan, I had tried so many different things: keto, paleo, fasting, you name it, I tried it, as well as training programs. So I knew if I was going to do this research this time, I needed to find something that was going to be stick and that was going to be sustainable and that was actually going to lead to the results that I wanted, because I was becoming a bit hopeless at that point.
Oh, yeah, that's a big thing to actually come from the dad bod, but I really appreciate that you're coming from trying. And so many people actually suffer with that. It's like, yeah, I'm working out every day. I think I'm eating healthy. You get into the fasting or keto bandwagon and things still aren't clicking. So
yeah,
I'd be curious, what was some of the big epiphanies you had along the way? Because if you were trying, it looked like you were trying, you're doing all the right things. What were some of the big changes you made?
Yeah, so some of the big changes I made was I looked at some of the habits that I had and I said, like, okay, obviously what I'm doing isn't working, right? So I need to figure out maybe the opposite of what I'll do is working. So at the time I was fasting for 16 hours a day. So I had realized that, hey, number one, I was 41 years old. My metabolism had slowed down dramatically over the last couple of years. And I realized that this was a common theme for men. So when I just put science, two and two together and a little bit of, logic there, I was like, well, I'm feeding my body a lot less frequently. It's inconsistent with the foods that are coming down the chute. So my body's probably doing what a bear does, right? Close to hibernation season, which is holding on to these calories, not knowing when the next meal is coming down in order to protect me, to stay alive. So I realized, okay, I need to speed up my metabolism. So I need to figure out the style of eating that's going to allow me to do that. And so that led me to macro-based meal planning, which allowed me to, one, have kind of structured meal plans throughout the day, not just eat after 16 or 18 hours, whatever I wanted, but hey, every 4 or 5 hours, we're going to eat a balanced plate. And then two was I'm going to make sure that I do some training every single day that was very specific and targeting what I wanted to achieve with my physique. And for me, it wasn't just about checking the box anymore. It was like, what do I want to look like? I wanted to, I was a young father, 41. I had 2 kids, or 3 and a newborn. Like, I wanted to be a strong figure for them. I wanted them to look up to me as their hero. And I was far from that. So I was like, I'm confident in. So I need to put some muscle on my frame. Now, I had been lifting all my life on and off, so I had some good muscle memory that I could tap into, but I wanted sustainability. Like, I really wanted to learn, how do I add real muscle to my body? And so that made me realize that those two things went together, which was nutrition and training. And then that was more of a lifestyle, because that couldn't be like 3 days on, blow the weekend. You weren't going to be able to grow muscle that way. So it said, okay, I've got to set up a system here that becomes one that I can manage and operate, and that becomes part of my life so that I get the results that I want from this effort. So I eventually led me to creating kind of 5 daily habits in my life that became non-negotiable. And as I implemented that, my physique started to change month after month. And that became addicting. It became addicting, one, because people were recognizing it and coming up to me and asking me for tips and tricks. And then I also started to feel a lot more confident and started to believe again that I wasn't too old. It wasn't too late, right? There wasn't something wrong with me. So those are some ideas that I kind of executed on.
Those are great, solid foundations. One of my favorite things that you said there at the end was the non-negotiables. It's probably one of the biggest problems, even when people have an idea of what to do, is when you get into negotiation is when you're probably making inappropriate actions. Because literally the moment that you're trying to decide whether or not it's the right action, it's probably not the right action, because you're justifying it. The right action is inherently right. You don't have to debate, should I eat the carrots? It's like, they're carrots. Like, I mean, I think it's not the problem. You're asking, should I skip a workout? Well, that's kind of where the problem is. When you start to create non-negotiables, you just remove the process of questioning it. Then you start to really just fall into the discipline and the habit. And people, will feel like they're missing motivation. It's more or less discipline of just doing what you know is the right choice.
100%, man. That was the big thing. I was so far away from where I wanted to be. I was over 30% body fat. I was highly inflammatory. I had all these autoimmune issues. It was showing up in my skin, right? I had rashes that were going on. I was sleeping poorly. My digestion was completely off. I was suffering from heartburn 24 hours a day. I threw enough pills at this thing to kill a whole army, and it just was not solving the problem. And I was realizing, like, I'm 41. I have another 30, 40 years in this body. Like, this does not scale well for me personally. And then how does that reflect? Like, how do I show up for my kids and my wife and my family? So then it became like, all right, well, I'm so far away from where I want to be. I can't say, well, I'll be happy when I get there. I'll be happy when I have that body, because I was so far away from that. So there was going to be a lot of suffering and negative self-talk and a negative energy or force in my home until I became that person. And that wasn't going to be something that was going to be good for anybody, right? So I went to the drawing board. I'm always into self-development. I've always been into this process of identify a problem, figure out the root cause, and then work on solving it. Like, so, I like to say I created version 2.0 of myself here, but really throughout my life, I'm probably on like version 8.0, because I've always identified that I was the common theme or common problem somewhere and had to fix something about myself. This just happened to be later in life where my physique had fallen off. But what I came down to, Ryland, was those daily non-negotiables were going to be the way that I was going to validate myself. I didn't need my wife to validate me, because when you're insecure, you need everybody around you to validate your actions. Don't you think I work hard? Don't you think I'm good looking? Don't you think I try hard enough? You know, you're always looking, and you're always playing the martyr. And so I realized, like, that just came from insecurity. That came from me not being comfortable in my own skin. And so I couldn't go on this journey of personal development where I was going to use training and nutrition as pieces of the puzzle and needed my wife to validate every move. So I didn't even tell her I was going to do this. I just started making these decisions and put these daily non-negotiables in my life. And I said, I'm not going to focus on the result. I'm going to trust that the result's going to come in, because it's science-backed, right? Like macro-based eating, very specific style of training, doing it over and over while properly recovering, feeding my mind properly, waking up early. Like, that's going to lead to a much better version of myself. It's just not going to happen tomorrow, result-wise, but mindset-wise, it happens now, the minute I make that decision. And so everything I did from that point on was about validating myself on the habits, in the work. And the work instilled the worth. And then the results came. You know, like, I didn't set out like, hey, I'm going to run this online coaching company and I'm going to get jacked and everybody's going to see, you know, me become something. That wasn't what it was about. It was like, how do I get to an elevated state every single day so that I'm a decent human being to be around? And so I use training and nutrition as pieces of that solution.
I think that's beautiful. Validation from action that you're in control of. I always try to really dress this up for people, that we can get too caught up in the mirror, because the mirror isn't just, self-reflection and reflection in the mirror are two different things. The way you actually look in the mirror and the way that you're looking at it aren't the same, because the way you're looking at it is influenced by your environment and basically your assumptions of your environment. Yeah. And so when I tell people, when you're going through this phase of trying to transform your body or physique, it's really important to look at exactly what you're saying. Don't reflect on the mirror, because the mirror is a delayed effect, right? A month, 2 months later, you might like it. But when you write down the habits, as you said, your non-negotiables, hey, I did this training, I did this nutrition. Every single day that you look at that, you look back at your week. I feel fucking proud of that week. That was a good week. That was a good day. So I love that you're really highlighting the value of validation of just your actions. Like, you're within control, right? When people feel out of control of their fitness and everything like that, it's like you're actually way more in control than you are. And I love that you addressed metabolism. So I'd love to pick this apart from your perspective, and just so the listeners can understand better. What does it mean for someone to have a slower metabolism as they age?
Yeah, so the way that I looked at it in my experience was, I wasn't optimal in terms of, I wanted to lose body fat, right? So I knew, okay, how do I do that? If I'm only, I can sustain calories for 16 or 18 hours, yes, and theoretically, I could lose weight that way if I put myself in a caloric deficit, right? But for me, I wanted a metabolism that was firing on all cylinders. I wanted to be hungry. I wanted my body to be operating like a car, like give it fuel, burn that fuel, request more fuel, right? And so when I was in the fasting stage, I just wasn't that way. It was like, oh, I guess it's time to eat, right? So for me, the metabolism was, I felt like I was controlling the controllable. If I can feed my body a very specific way, and I can set up markers throughout my day to have these micro goals, right? 6 a.m. pre-workout meal, 9 o'clock post-workout meal, 12 o'clock meal number 3, 4 o'clock, meal number 4. Then I had these goalposts every day that in between those hours, I could be where my feet were and execute on my business or be with my family. But in the interim, I knew, okay, I'm getting the energy I need to sustain the next 4 hours of this productive block that I'm going to be in. And that meant, like, I was going to challenge myself to, can I put healthy calories in my body? Because it was going to be a lot more food than I'd ever been eating, even though it was less calories than I was consuming normally on a day, but get my body to start processing that food quickly and rapidly, to break down those macronutrients into micronutrients and distribute it into my bloodstream and feed my muscles, because that was the goal for me. I wanted to have a very specific look, and that look was only going to come by feeding the muscle properly. And so that became a game of frequency. How many calories can I push on a daily basis, and it'll speed up that metabolism to where it's firing on all cylinders. And most guys that come into my program, the first week or 10 days, like, dude, this is a lot of food. I can't eat all this food, right? Even though they're in a major deficit, they're 300 to 500 calorie deficit, but they're coming into the program only eating 2 meals a day, feeling like I barely eat. I don't know why I can't lose weight. And the problem is your body's become a storage unit. Right? It doesn't know when it's going to get fed again, so it's holding on to the calories that it has. What you want to do is break it down into smaller portions, more frequent portions, and turn that baby back into a furnace again. So I create that metaphor for guys saying, hey, right now you got to understand your body's a storage unit, and it's storing it all around your gut and all around your love handles because it doesn't know when it's getting the next meal, what that meal is going to consist of, and it's going to take a while to process and break down those foods if they're inconsistent. But if we speed up our metabolism, we can do that with smaller, more frequent meals with more consistent foods that are optimal for digestion. And that creates the predictability for the system to say, I know what's coming down, when it's coming down, and what I need to do with it. And then it's going to process that and go, I got another meal coming down the chute in 4 hours. So now that baby starts kicking on all cylinders, and that's releasing energy, that's keeping your mood stabilized, keeping your energy stabilized. And so for me and my guys, like we're business owners, we're leaders, we're family men, you need carbs, right? If you pull those carbs out or you do the fasting thing, there's just a lot of inconsistencies with how your metabolism is going to work through those calories and break them down so that they become a good energy source for you. So that's how I look at it in my system, in my world.
Right. I really totally know what you mean. You sign someone up and you give them whole food and you show them how much they can eat. I don't think I can eat this much food. It's like, well, trust me, you've been eating more than that. And I think the big shift too is the protein quantity and the whole food quantity is what people are usually missing. And especially on a Monday to Friday, the average person is thinking that they do not have a right to feel full. And it's not that you're like massively full, but you're way more full than you're normally going to feel because you're eating more protein. And it's just like, whoa, I can eat that much protein. I had a client just the other day. It's like, oh, I just got the food scale. I didn't know I was supposed to eat that much. That is so much food. And it's like, yeah, you have a right to not feel starving during the week. You naturally almost get this, I want to say it's like gratifying or appreciation. You're like, oh, I'm supposed to be hungry. When you're not tracking, you're just going to go from intuition. Your intuition's shit because it's either starving or overloading. And when you're overloading, you're going to only listen to the hyperpalatable foods and overdo it. And I think that the only thing I kind of look at a little bit different the way that you're talking about it in terms of the metabolism. I don't feel like it's as much metabolism because your metabolism is only going to change so much in that adaptive process. There are changes, right? So if someone, and I would argue that what usually happens to people Monday to Friday is that they're not actually eating a lot of food. And you're right that they become a storage unit, but I think it's mostly on the weekends or around hyperpalatable foods. So if they do Monday to say Friday and they're barely eating, like they say, during the week, and then they're also kind of training. So you're actually in quite a deficit for a few days, but so they are burning some calories because just your metabolic rate, like your BMR is going to burn so many calories. But what you mentioned there, what makes their body really a huge storage unit is that their ghrelin's going to be fucked up. Their leptin's going to be fucked up by the end of the week. And then when they're around hyperpalatable foods, they don't even know that they're eating in excess of, 1,500 calories on Friday, 2,000 calories on Saturday and Sunday. And then they go back to their deficit on Monday, just thinking that that's what they're supposed to eat. As you mentioned, when you start to feel full throughout the week, well, then even if you're around hyperpalatable foods, but you start to even crave more whole foods, that's when the body starts making those changes. And I think that's where people are really missing it in terms of just you have a right to enjoy your diet Monday to Friday. And so many people are missing how much, especially protein alone, if the healthy food guides could just increase protein content in people. I'm not saying it would fix the obesity epidemic, but it would make a huge impact if people went from 15 to 20% protein to 30 to 40%. Just huge changes in appetite regulation.
100%, man. I totally agree. There's clients that'll always come in and they'll kind of say like, well, I didn't know that like 140 grams of protein was that much. Like, you sure I should be eating that much? And it's like, yeah, we've got to be eating that much. And then you'll find that the first week it's like, all right, well, I'm just going to do it. And most of them will get through that first stage. But then kind of week 2 or 3, depending on the client, it's like, man, I'm staring at the watch, waiting for the alarm to go off to say I can eat again, right? And I'm like, all right, now we're firing, right? Like, and then they get the concept of, okay, and then they feel good. Like, this is what fat burning feels like. This is what that he meant by that metabolism speeding up. And then you just kind of get the consistency of, giving them whole food, single ingredient foods. It really makes a world of difference for them because their digestion has a lot more predictability in it, and that shows up in their, in their physique. And so that's, I think, is one of the most important things, is understanding that breakdown of, like, based on your goals, based on your age, based on your day, like, how much protein, how much carbs, how much fat, and just having a proper balance of those things, but then making sure within each category that you're picking optimal foods.
For sure. The food choice makes such a big difference. And every person's different, right? Like what they actually get more satiety from and stuff like that. And I always tell people, like, it's protein, energy, micronutrients, and enjoyment are the four staples. But enjoyment's super relative. Like what I find makes, digest well for me might not digest well for you, or what I get satiety from. And it's where you got to optimize your diet. As you mentioned, people will start feeling a little bit hungrier. It's like, okay, well, do you want to have, your meat and just a bunch of white rice? A lot of the times I then encourage people, is like, white rice isn't a bad thing. But maybe you want to have less rice and more fibrous vegetables. And that's something I get a lot of my clients, like, double the amount of vegetables you have and cut down on the other carbs. Now, the other carbs are bad. It's just the fiber is going to fill you a lot more, and you're going to feel a lot more. Well, you get more nutrients from it anyways. So it just ends up benefiting you a lot more. I wanted to come back to metabolism real quick, because you talked about how we can optimize our food and refueling our bodies. Better energy, you'll probably feel better throughout the day. And I do think that would make an impact on the metabolism. But I think there's also some misconceptions to metabolism. Have you ever kind of broken it down for your client, what kind of goes into metabolism, all the different groupings of it?
No, not really. Give me an idea. Give me a reference and I'll tell you if I've maybe had something relatable just at a different angle.
Yeah. So, I mean, I always break it down for the clients that, it's your BMR, basal metabolic rate, your thermal effect of food, your exercise activity thermogenesis, and your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And so people understand how they can control their metabolism. Because one of the things that I think gets misconstrued a lot is when people say, I have a slow metabolism because I age. And when you look at the stats, there's like a 100 to 200 calorie difference. That is not as dramatic as people want to think it is. So from the age of 18 to 20 years old, all the way to the age of 60, you're talking about a 200 calorie difference. And so that's not pounds of body fat. No. The major thing that most people are missing is actually activity and lean mass. Because when you're 18, 20 years old, maybe you're on campus, you're active, you're doing sports, you're seeing friends. And when you're in your 30s and 40s, you start having a sedentary job, you're not moving around as much, and people are losing muscle mass because, as you mentioned, they're not in the protein and they're not training. As you mentioned, you trained for your physique. And I think the thing I really like to dress up for people is, like, all of these habits you have control of. You eat more protein and you strength train and you walk enough, and you're going to meet all of those necessities, right? Because all of those go into your metabolism fundamentally.
That's right.
Yeah. So when it comes to anything else that you think people don't really understand or are missing, what are people missing when it comes to, let's start with just training. What are things that people don't get right?
I mean, there's so many, everyone's different, right? So everyone has a different journey. Some guys come in, I'm like, what's the routine that you're doing? Well, I played high school football, or in college, me and my buddy used to train. This is the same routine. It's like, all right, so you've been doing the same routine for the last 20 years. Yeah, well, it's some basics. Even though it's some basics, are you executing it? Are you taking advantage of kind of making sure that you're stressing the muscle properly long enough? Are you incorporating form? Like, are you progressively overloading? Are you working on tempo? Like, so it's just educating these guys that we don't need at our age to get injured. Like, that's the most important thing that I stress to people. We're not in the game of risking injury. We want to make sure that this is sustainable. That's one of the reasons I didn't choose like CrossFit, because CrossFit, even though I love the camaraderie and the group aspect of it, I just saw a lot of those moves as like one wrong move and the back is gone, a shoulder's blown out, and I sidelined myself long enough to never get back into this thing. So I always tell guys, like, we're not gonna be messing around with 1 rep maxes. Like, the ego days of lifting are over. So we're gonna focus really on form, time under tension, making sure that we're properly engaging and putting the right stress on the muscle so that we're sending enough blood flow there so that the nutrients can be released from from the blood into the muscle that we've had prior, and we're going to feed that muscle properly so that it grows properly. So I kind of just go to the real basics of that. And then I usually will I always program something that's hypertrophy style training, and then we work on progressively overloading that. So that's the premise of our style of training is really hypertrophy style, progressive overload, focusing on form, and then using different techniques like, tempo or time under tension, or quarter reps, finishing supersets, things like that, and really kind of getting them to understand the science behind how you grow a muscle. And that's, you've got to send enough blood to that area. In order to send blood there, you've got to have the right form and be using the right muscle group to do that. If you fed the muscle properly before your training, then your glycogen is going to be depleted into your bloodstream. That bloodstream is going to get sent to that muscle group, and those nutrients are going to get distributed into that muscle. So then we're going to finish with cardio and kind of move that blood around to make sure that we're completely depleted, the nutrients are into the muscle group, and then we're going to feed it again properly. So it just kind of goes into this cycle of making them understand, this is why we eat something before, this is how we want to train the muscle to put stress on it properly to help it grow, and this is how we want to recover it. And so that's really just the simplest version of saying it.
Cool. So within your routine, as you mentioned, you start with strength training, you actually finish with some cardio work?
Always, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. How long are your workouts?
Usually my guys are about an hour in total.
Hour in total.
Yeah.
No, that's great. And
as they progress, like some of the guys that get more into it, so we can push them like 75 minutes.
Cool. And how many days a week is that split usually?
Mostly 5.
5-day split. Yeah. And do you kind of do a lower, upper, or what's your kind of routine of focusing the muscle groups?
It's really different for everybody, dude.
Totally.
Yeah, totally. Like some guys that are coming in new, and I'd say like 5 days probably going to be a lot. So let's go with, we're going to do a push-pull legs, and we're going to do every other day, right? And so if they're working at home, I've got certain equipment that I got to design a program around, or if they're going to go to like a Planet Fitness, or okay, I know they got some equipment, so I'll give them a push-pull legs Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then I may even say, hey, because we want to bake the habit in, I still want you getting up and going to the gym. So on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, we're going to go and we're going to do some fasted cardio, right? So we're going to start making sure that we're moving the body every single day, and we're reducing our body fat. So that would be an example. A guy that's further along, he's 12 weeks in, we've gotten his body fat down from like 22% down to 11%. He's gone from 3 days to 4 days to 5 days. Now he's like, hey, Saturday morning, you got something for me? Then I'm giving him a 6-day split, right? And we're doing post-workout cardio. And then Sunday, we're just waking up doing fasted cardio, and then we're enjoying the day. So it's really about teaching these guys that the habit is part of the lifestyle. It's not, we want to kind of stay on the grind of moving every day, sweating every day. And we make sure that we're not overtraining them. So that's why I like the workouts to vary from body to body. All of our guys wear whoops, so I can track their strain, their recovery, their sleep. And we have a group inside my community within Whoop, so we all kind of keep each other competitive and have fun with that strain. And so that's how I manage it. So I do manage kind of their output, like, hey, how hard are they pushing? How well is their body recovering on a daily basis? And then we're in constant communication with my clients. Like on a daily basis, they message me inside the app, and then every week we calibrate. So every Friday we do a check-in, and we make sure, based on that check-in form, how well they slept, how well they recovered, what their pump was like, if there are any soreness, and we go through kind of this list of things so that I can make some calibrations if I need to on the weekend. And sometimes we're adjusting cardio, sometimes we're adjusting nutrition, sometimes we're adjusting some training or swapping out some things. So that's really, that's where that personalization comes in. It all depends on the client. We literally build the entire program for them across 4 pillars. So I don't have like a PDF where I'm like, oh, this is my program, and you sign up, this is what you're going to get. I will sit down, they're going to tell me their schedule, what time they wake up, what are their challenges, all their experiences, any past injury, with the equipment they have. And then we come back and we build a couple of things for them. One is a custom training program that's very prescriptive. This is what you're going to train, when you're going to train it, and exactly how you need to be training it. This is what you're going to eat, when you're going to eat, and exactly how much to eat, all the way down to the times, right? And then we include supplementation. So we're going to tell them, based on where they are and their goals, now that we're training properly, we're getting good nutrients in, now we're going to get better absorption. So now we can include some supplementation. And we'll, build that supplement list for them. And then we always finish that 4th pillar with cardio. to make sure that, good cardiovascular strength, good heart health, and then also reducing our body fat.
Cool. So yeah, very cardio heavy program, which is actually terrific for people as they age. You're going to want to get more of that zone 2 cardio for heart health. So do you end up encouraging that they track steps at all? Because you have such a cardio-based program, I feel like you really don't have to as much. So that kind of eliminates that part. No, and that's, every program is a bit different with that. And that's usually actually what I get my clients to do is track the steps if they don't have time for the cardio, but you're able to fit it in within the hour. So it works well. I was curious if you believe that the fasted cardio is a more increases fat burning capacity, or is it just more of a habit thing?
It's both. I think it's a little bit of both, right? So one, it's the habit of waking up and pushing the body, because my whole program is predicated on 5 daily non-negotiables that I've instilled, and I try to get my guys to instill that. And one is waking up early, right? Getting up early before everyone else, so that you kind of set that first W of the day. Like, I'm up before the world is up, before the demands start on me as the leader of my home, as the leader of my community. Like, we need to get up and take care of ourselves. So the first one is getting up early. The second one is reading something positive on mindset to continue to develop themselves and their mentality, because what got them there is a weaker mindset, right? It puts you in a position where your body is a dad-bod is you've dropped some standards in your life. And when you drop some standards, you tend to have a little bit of a distorted view on certain things. We're kind of rewiring the brain to understand, hey, we're going to control the controllable. We can't control everything in our life, but we can control how we respond to those things. So it starts by putting the right information in our brain every day. The third thing is getting up and doing a workout, right? Getting your sweat on, releasing serotonin. And so that's either going and pushing weights and doing some cardio, or getting up and hitting that machine. So like this morning, today's a rest day for me, but I got up and did my 45 minutes of cardio, because I got to get that training in. So the fat burning piece of it is important, but also it's the habit piece. And when you do it in the morning, that's also going to increase their hunger throughout the day. So we're still going to be able to push enough calories on that day, healthy calories. You reduce their carbs on those days, but to help with the recovery day. So those are a couple of the reasons why.
Right. I love that you have the habits. I love that they're so structured around that mindset. And just anecdotally, I've seen in a lot of clients, people who are willing to get up and immediately get some locomotion going, immediately have a purpose. Like, you give a person a reason they got to get up, they're going to start the day with better intent. It just always works well. I was just curious as to if you've seen any literature research on it, because it's not that it's bad, right? Because if people lose weight by doing more activity, but let's say you had a client that wanted to do their cardio in the evening, is that setting anything off? Is that going to be less beneficial from your understanding?
No, it's the same thing. So if the guy can't do it in the morning, then we'll say, okay, great, you're going to do it later in the day or early in the evening. It's fasted at least 2 hours after your last meal.
So does the fasting make a difference?
We want them to be as close to their next meal as possible.
Right.
There's no food in their stomach, and that you're going to start tapping into some stubborn fat areas.
So you're saying that if they had just eaten and then they worked out, that they wouldn't burn as much body fat?
I don't want them training at that time. I'm going based off of, if you follow, who are the best body sculptors in the world?
Well, like bodybuilders, for sure. Yeah.
So what do bodybuilders do?
So quite a few of them will do fasted cardio, and it's a very traditional approach. And the reason why I'm not against it, and I think it works great for appetite, because you don't want to do cardio and then be hungry. Like, it's a terrible system.
Or you don't want to do cardio right after you just ate.
Yeah, well, it's because that's going to spike your appetite, right? Because if you just ate and you're in a calorie deficit and you just had your meal and then you did your cardio and you're like, okay, I got to eat in another 3 hours, like, that's probably going to not work well for you. Yes. I would just say, like, from what I've seen in the research, is that it doesn't mean that you can't burn body fat, because most of the body fat burning is when you sleep. So your net calorie deficit matters within the hours of sleeping than it does in the instant of you doing the physical cardio. But I'm a big fan of what you're mentioning. I think it's still a good system. It just, in terms of how people can fit it in their life, it's important to know that it's flexible, right? Because if we get too caught up in this idea of, like, it has to be fasted or it has to be in the morning, then some people might not be able to fit that in. But if we
Yeah.
can say it's get your, like, that's why I'm a huge advocate for steps, because if you can get 10,000, 12,000 steps in a day, it's not quite as good for heart health, but it's still really active and you're still moving enough to increase your metabolic rate. So it is still quite beneficial.
Yes.
But I'm not
with all that.
disagreeing that you have like a good system there. I just like for people to appreciate the flexibility is there, and
Yes.
just in terms of how it can fit different lifestyles. So,
Yes, totally agree with you on all that. Mine is based on is one, the habit, and then two, making sure that, so we don't, if I say, hey, you got to eat a meal now, and then you're going to go do your cardio, then we're going to have some issues. Like my whole thing is we don't have to starve to lose weight. Like that's
Right.
one of the things that I teach my guys. Like that's what I always tell them. Like, see, I told you the benefit of the system is we don't have to remove the foods that we love. We don't have to go without carbs, and we don't have to starve to lose weight. We can still maintain our lifestyle. So for me, the frequency of saying, hey, get up and bake the habit in of getting the cardio done, that's good, right? And that's going to help you kind of start your day the way that we want you to start, like elevating your vibration. That's the key to why we get up and move our body. And then if they're like, hey, man, I couldn't make it today. Hey, no big deal. Do it 2 hours after your last meal. And that's just the protocol. Why? So probably because it also goes back to like, so that you just don't eat, you do that, and then you're going to be hungry again. Now the rest of the schedule is off. So like, let's just stay the course, eat your meal, find a time later, 2 hours after that last meal to crank it in. But I totally agree with you. You can't burn, you only burn the fat and build the muscle when you're sleeping. So the recovery point is there as long as you have the deficit. So totally aligned there. But it's more like lifestyle, I guess, as well. But I've learned that from my coaches, which are, I've hired IFBB pros as my coach in my journey. And these were the ways, like when I went and built my whole body, it was based off of who were the best sculptors in the world, who do this for a living.
Yeah.
On a daily basis, what have these people done in their rituals and their habits that has allowed them to sculpt their body? And so my whole program is based off of my experience, and my experience comes from the bodybuilding community.
Right. And the ritual is the most important thing, I think, with a fasted cardio. Like, I still love morning cardios. Like, it's absolutely the easiest thing to just get up. Like I said, in that purpose, morning workouts, just get it done. The longer that the later in the day that your workout or whatever the task is planned, the less likely you're going to do it. So that's best for adherence. I'd be curious what other kind of tips you have for people. Again, what else do people possibly get wrong? And we could talk about maybe now in the nutrition aspect that you see that you have to commonly correct with people.
Well, I think the big thing for me, like 8 out of 10 people that come in are going to be eating 2 meals a day. So that's always one of the corrections that we make, is like getting them to look at food a little bit differently and to start looking at it as food over flavor, as fuel versus flavor, like changing their perception around with the purpose of food. So that's one of them. The number two, it's snacking and how detrimental it can be. So a lot of that can either be, like seeds. A lot of guys come in and are like, oh, can I snack on some nuts? Like, we don't want you eating nuts, right? Because they're highly inflammatory, they're super dense in calories, and they're going to put you over the calorie deficit that we're in, because you're not going to realize that, a handful of nuts was just 300 or 400 calories. So those are like little things that we always kind of have to correct with people, where they think it's no big deal. Other things is sodium intake. Like, we really control the sodium intake. So we're making sure that people are controlling how much they're putting on their food. They're not just using any seasoning, but we're always like, hey, we want to stay to salt-free seasonings, and we want to just add pink Himalayan salt, and we want to just add for taste. And so that's changing their taste buds as well. And then you couple that with single food, whole foods, they start to get this new appreciation for food. Like, it doesn't have to be so complex. It doesn't have to be so gluttonous. It doesn't have to be so heavy, right? And so they're coming from a place of like where it's all about flavor. It's all about like consumption and satisfaction and comfort. And when you change the way they look at things, the things they look at change. So I'm always changing their perception around food, and how like these whole foods, lean proteins, good carbohydrate source is for this purpose, healthier fats versus unhealthier fats. These are key. And then educating them on things that are highly inflammatory, like seed oils and gluten for some people. And alcohol is a big thing. We ask guys to remove alcohol when they're in the program, because alcohol, if we're working on the mind, which is, we're less about a meal plan and a training plan. Like, you can go on YouTube, man, and watch that at night and get yourself in a calorie deficit and lose 15 pounds, but it's not going to be sustainable. We're all about, hey, we're going to control the mind and change the mind. And in order to do that, we've got to use training and nutrition as ways. Like the gym is for the mind, the kitchen is for the body, right? And so the fourth piece of that is you're doing the food prep, the meal, the training, the cardio. You stop all that process from working if you include alcohol. And I don't think a lot of people tie that together. So when you really put a whoop on their wrist and you say, hey, I want you to track when you drink alcohol and I want you to look at that recovery number the next day, and then they see, holy shit, man, I have like a 15 recovery and I'm in the red from the 2 beers that I had last night. Well, because look at how your body responds. And then they see that often enough, then they start going, well, maybe I don't need those 2 drinks. Maybe because of all the other things that I'm doing, the money I invested, the time I've invested, the food that I'm consuming, is it really worth it? So we really get them to question some of those unhealthy habits, and removing vices like, porn, drinking, and smoking, or doing any sort of drug should be removed, because we want to create a world and an environment and a life that we don't ever need to escape. And so we're changing the way that their brain is connecting to certain things that have just been so normal for them. So those are some of the more common ones that we're working on for guys.
You said it really beautifully there. You're trying to create a life that you don't need to escape. It's so missed within these transformations. And this is also why it's so hard, is because, 9 out of 10 people gain their weight back, if not more, right? 95%, I think. And so people will try a lifestyle and stuff like that, and they just don't get this acceptance of it. They don't realize it's supposed to be there to stay or to evolve to a better version of yourself, the better version of these habits. The other one I want to highlight was food is for fuel and not just for flavor. And you can change your perception of flavor. It's just that when you're used to these hyper palatable foods, the whole foods almost don't feel like they have a fucking chance. I always try to compare like a normal distribution on like, let's say, food pleasure, on a scale from 1 to 10. Most foods should be around a 6 or a 7. They shouldn't even be above a 7, especially because our distribution is skewed. So when you think about like how flavorful, say, like even an apple or an orange is now, it's like a 6 or a 7. But then when you go back 2,000 years ago, when, there was nothing but rarely was there farming, someone hands you an orange, you'd be like, what is this wonderful fruit? And it tastes amazing to people. And that would have been a 9 out of 10. And now it's barely a 6 for most people. And it just tastes boring. But the great thing about it being boring is that you're not going to eat too much of it. And so when you start to, like you mentioned, rewire your brain around these foods, you start to actually just set into it. Hey, let's look at the other benefits. It's the immediate gratification versus delayed. Not only do these foods actually taste good, better and better the more you eat them, but if you can change the way you feel about eating them, hey, I'm digesting it better. I have better energy throughout the day. I am hungry 3 or 4 hours later, but I'm also full from the food after I eat it. And you start to realize, your brain's working better, and especially that alcohol thing. That's actually a really cool evolution I'm seeing in culture now, is that more people are seeing the value in not drinking. And just like if it was like 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, you say, I'm not going to drink tonight, people are like, are you okay? And now people are just like, maybe I should have a non-alcoholic beer. And it's actually becoming way more commonplace, which is so positive for just society. As you mentioned, 2 beers, like 2 drinks, especially close to bed, that's going to fuck up your sleep. Like it's just, it's going to make a huge impact for what? This one quick little immediate gratification on a Wednesday night, when really, if you skip those 2 beers, or maybe you had 1 non-alcoholic and you made it fit your calories, you get a better sleep and your next day is better, because when you sleep better, everything is better. It's just like people do not appreciate how big of an impact that sleep is. And because a lot of the time people get into the self-pity cycle of poor sleep. So it's like you have a really tough day because you're tired all day because you didn't get enough sleep the night before. Then you finally get home and then you want to watch TV, or you want a beer and you want to have me time. And then you stay up later, or you have shitty sleep because of the beer. The next day, you have to go through it again because you're tired again.
Same thing.
And you want to be
that cycle, dude, for like 2 years.
And I always try to dress this up and just say, hey, your whole fucking day is you time. Your whole day is you. And if you can't just have a little bit more will in the evening, the next day is going to suck. And if you start the cycle right, when you're like, I just need a little bit of will to pull away from the TV, not have that extra drink and go to bed earlier, the whole day is better and you're in a better mood by the end of the day. So it's just this wonderful cycle that keeps moving forward. So I think that's great information that you're providing them. I would love to know, because there's a lot of information on the internet these days. Like we in a similar industry, and we just got to battle a lot of the noise out there.
Yeah.
So what is pissing you off in the social media these days?
I don't pay attention to much of it, but I would say the fasting thing, like one of the big celebrities did it, and he lost all this weight. Or maybe Dana White, right? I think it was Dana White, and he lost all this weight. And then you have these clients that are like looking for the short, quick fix. Like, hey, what do you think about the fasting? Or what do you think about whatever that drug is, the weight loss drug?
Ozempic.
Oh yeah, Ozempic. Like another one. It's like, well, these are Band-Aids. Like, again, you're not looking to solve this problem through time. You're being impatient. And I teach people, like, one of my favorite sayings to my clients is, listen, man, it's macro patience, micro urgency, right? Which means we understand that this is a long game. We're not the destination is daily. It's achieved daily. We have to earn it daily. We're not focused on 15 pounds, because then what happens when you get to 15 pounds? You slowly start letting off that gas. What happens when you take Ozempic and it gets you off 15, it takes the 15 pounds off? What happens then? You got to stay on it forever, right? Because you haven't learned the skill set or the discipline or the habits required to keep it off. You're just looking for the quick fix. And yeah, okay, you could sustain in a short period of time the fasting like Dana White and lose this, but what happens when you get hungry? What toolkit can you fall back on? If you don't have the principles and the habits and the rituals, you're going to gain it right back. Yeah, you showed that you had willpower for 7 days or 14 days, however long these fasting things are, or these juicing things, but it's like, again, you don't have the skill set. You've taken a very brief path to try to shortcut your way around the big problem in your life, which is you have to look at your daily habits and your daily routine and figure out, how do I sustain the lifestyle that I want with a better set of habits and install a healthier set of rituals. And so, like, those are things that annoy me. I'm like, no, we're not looking to shortcut this. Like, just do the work, right? The master plan doesn't change. You just have to master the plan and get better at mastering the plan, right? And like the whole thing around the food and like fuel, it's like same thing. Like now, guys, including myself, I've been eating the same exact thing for like 18 months, right? Like the same exact thing. And every single day, I cannot wait for my first meal, because it has a different flavor component, right? Like it's cream of rice and it's protein and it has some maple in it. It's like every day I can't wait for that. And then 4 hours later, my post-workout meal, which is rice and lean ground beef and pickles and fat-free and sugar-free ketchup. It's like a burger bowl. Every day I can't wait for it. And all my clients that are in this thing are always like, I look forward to meal number one. Then I look for, so you get 5 or 6 just phenomenal meals that would have seemed boring and mundane 12 weeks ago or 2 years ago, but now all of a sudden you realize how well you respond, how well your body keeps changing. Now all of a sudden you have a new appreciation for all of these meals and you look forward to every one of them. But it does take some time. It's like if I tell my kid, hey, I want you to try this, and 2 minutes before that he eats a chocolate bar or a bite of a chocolate bar, he's just blowing his chances of enjoying whatever the hell I'm going to give him, right? And that's happened so many times. Like, you can't eat a piece of chocolate before I want you to try something. Like, it's just not comparable, dude. Like, so same thing with other people. But when you get enough momentum to where you see that these foods, right, and these habits are changing the way you physically look and feel about yourself, then you start to change the way you look at those foods. And then you start to get excited and you become invested in that lifestyle component. Like, this is my life now. This isn't a diet. This is a lifestyle. These are the foods that I eat. This is what version 2.0 of myself enjoys. And like, that was the thing with drinking, like giving up drinking. I would do the first 4 pillars. I would wake up early. I'd read something positive. I'd train hard daily. I would follow a meal plan every day. But then I'd come home and drink, or I'd have some drink, right? And I'd escape. And all of a sudden, I was like, I would associate with my old version, right? I'd get angry, or I'd pick a fight with my wife, or I'd start getting in this like negative talk and complaining about politics or the world, whatever it was. And I'm like, here I am spending all day doing these other habits to create another that my best future version of myself has. People that I admire and respect, they have these habits. And now I'm bringing in the old guy and he's ruining everything else that I'm doing, right? So I had to create this new identity of who I wanted to be and who I admired. And then I wanted to gift that to the world. And so that one was like, yeah, I need to create the life that I don't need to escape ever. So I'm going to remove that piece of it. So same thing with guys. Like I'm like, did you get to this point because you like the habits and the person that you are right now? And most of them are like, no. So then why are we going to hold so stubbornly to those habits? Why are we, we took shortcuts throughout our whole life. Like, let's be patient with this process and trust that it's going to work. And let's get super invested in executing and winning every day. That every day is the win. Like, we have to go out and earn it every day. And in earning it and going through that discomfort is where we elevate ourselves to a higher level. And that's when we actually believe in ourselves and we actually are like, I feel good. Like, because we're all I always say we all suffer, right? When you don't have routine, you're not disciplined, you're suffering. There are areas of your life that you're suffering in, whether it's your confidence or your impact or your production or your relationships or your finances. You're quietly suffering, sometimes unconsciously suffering. But if you choose to suffer, wake up early, read something, do that workout, follow me up and sustain. At the end of the day, you've stacked all these micro victories to where your head's up, your shoulders back, you look yourself in the mirror and you said, I did the difficult thing today. I feel amazing. And tomorrow I repeat that again. Now you got 1 day, this is 2 days, this is 3 weeks, this is 3 months. You're a completely different human being, right? And that's the power.
Yeah, that I believe it was Buddha. All life is suffering, and it's like, actually, like, do you want to choose your suffering, or do you want to, deal with your suffering? And
that's right.
You're really looking at immediate gratification, delayed suffering, or immediate discomfort and delayed gratification. And you can look at it just like debt that either your bank has interest that you owe it, or it owes you. And it is compound interest both ways. So if you don't do the shit you should, you're owing yourself a lot of fucking pain. It's going to come in. It's going to keep adding up. That's how people get worse and worse with health. But the people who are willing to upfront that discomfort, go through the suffering. And you had mentioned it, and I've said this before, it's, do you want to suffer with a purpose or suffer for no reason? And because if you're choosing immediate gratification, there's no real reason you're suffering other than that immediate gratification. And so it doesn't matter. You're going to feel the pain. The pain's actually way worse if it's the delayed. It ends up feeling way worse. And the other thing I got to highlight, you said so well, are you proud of the person that you're being? And that's its own form of suffering. But if you choose the suffering first, you're willing to accept the challenge, and you invite the journey that you have to take, then you're going to look back at all the stuff that's difficult with pride. It's like, yeah, my life has some difficulties to it, but it's the person that I am that can embrace the difficulty. Yes. That's why I always say in my podcast and my program kind of philosophy is, life is not about the pursuit of happiness, but the happiness within pursuit. Because you always feel way more inspired by going after things, not even achieving them. It's going after things that makes it what it's about. So I love so many of those things you said. And I just also got to add on that fasting thing. So glad you addressed that. It's a quick fix, and it's actually just giving people privilege to have a disordered eating issue. If you're not eating good whole food most of the time, you're overweight, you probably binge eat on the weekends. It's like, maybe I need a 5-7 day fast. No, that's a form of eating disorder, right? Yeah. If you came off of, and I've been open for this, like, there could be other benefits. And if you have a tight diet, you already have a good physique, you're already in shape, you tell me you have other cognitive benefits that you get from fasting for a few days, I'm not really going to argue against that person too much. But someone who's currently binge eating, I had a friend who's like, yeah, I think I just got off this trip, I need a few day fast. So, like, but why? Like, you're not in a good headspace. And you're not, like, you want to catapult into it. I said, this is where we started. I said, hey, how about you do protein sparing modified fast? Okay, what do? Eat a lot of protein and fiber. Okay, so I basically just eat a whole food diet. Yes. So it's just like, just go to what you should, because it's the work you got to do anyway. So that's right. Well, I love all the stuff you said here today. We've had a really good chat, great message. And I'd love to finish off with, what is your most recent ambition? What are you really excited coming down the pipeline?
That's a great question. So what was the last part of it? The recent?
Just recent ambitions. It could be life, work, anything that you're super excited about.
Oh, it's such a good question, man. I mean, I've got so many things on the plate that I'm excited about. I'm launching my new website, which has been a big project of mine. We're launching my book, which will be included in that website, talking about these 5 daily kind of non-negotiables and how they can impact your life immediately. Because I think that that's an important piece. So many people want to get in the physique of their dreams tomorrow, which they can't, but they can adopt the mindset of the person they want to be tomorrow. So that's an important project. And so I've been working on those two things. The clients that I've been kind of bringing on, like my business has really scaled a lot. So I've got a lot of joint venture partnerships that I've signed on that we're going to be going to market with. So super excited about that, which means like I'm aligning with other kind of influencers that have clients that are also like-minded, but we will complement and make that offering to my clients and their clients. So those are it. And then in terms of that, like my kids are in jiu-jitsu, my kids are into BMX biking. So that's a big part of my life. I love watching them excel, like put themselves through challenging situations and kind of lean into fear. That's something that I'm always excited about. You know, I think my whole journey was inspired by my kids. Like I looked at where I was 3 years ago and I was like, you know, how does this scale? I'm the same person 3 years from now. He's 6, he's 3. Who am I for them? You know, he's 9, he's 6. Who am I for them? And I realized, like, I can't tell these kids to have standards and to chase their dreams if I'm sitting back just living a life of comfort. Because my headhunting business, which was #1 in the world, and what we did brought me a lot of income and brought me a lot of success. And I chose comfort every day, which ultimately brought tons of suffering in my life. So I now decided, hey, I'm going to choose my own suffering, and I'm going to take my kids and show them that, hey, I'm going to grow with you and not just tell you to grow. So that's a big thing for me, man. It's just growing every day and trying to beat the guy from the day before.
That's beautiful. I love that you're setting that mission out for your kids. To me, I don't think there's a better inspiration than the ones you care about. You know, it could be your kids, it could be your family members. I always said my parents were my biggest inspiration to prove to them what I could do for them. Yeah. And it because it takes it kind of outside yourself. I always say that we're willing to do more for others that we really love than we are for ourselves. I always use the comparison of if you see people getting tortured in a movie, you would take the torture for yourself, but the moment they go to hurt someone else, that's when it's like it gets to you. And you got to think about that's the impact that your health is having on others. Is if you're not your best self, you're not your best self for them. So you not doing the work isn't just a sacrifice against you. It's against the others that isn't get the best version of yourself. So you're inspiring to be that, which I think is beautiful. Yeah. Why don't you let people know where they can find out more about you?
Yeah, so I'm on all the social medias. The best place is going to be my website, which is dadbodsculptors.com. And on there, you'll learn more about me, my journey, and kind of my experience. And then that'll lead you to any one of my socials that you like to consume content on. So Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, those are primarily where you can consume a lot of my content. And if any of that resonates with you, there'll be an opportunity to click a link and have a strategy chat with me.
Terrific. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dane. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, of course, bro. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks again to Dane for that conversation. It was really cool to see his system, his 5 pillars of health. What I really want to highlight again, and I talked about it in the episode, is that the non-negotiables is a mindset for people to incorporate in any program they're in. That you got to understand what is non-negotiable. Because if you stop negotiating with yourself, you'll start to appreciate that it's just reinforcing the same habits again and again. Sleep on time. It's great non-negotiable. Eating so much protein, eating so much fiber, making sure that you strength train 3 to 5 days a week. Good non-negotiables. He has different non-negotiables, but I do really appreciate just that there is a standard that you keep for yourself and you don't deliberate it. As I mentioned, if you start to justify why I could maybe do something else, you know it's inherently the wrong decision. We're trying to use negotiating in order to justify our emotional state to not do the things we're supposed to do. So I love that he just discusses them so well, just calling it non-negotiable. And I love the start of the mindset and movement first thing. Appreciating that very first thing, you move. Now, he is very tied to the fasting cardio. Fasted cardio is a very traditional bodybuilding approach. As he mentioned, this is where the bodybuilders have done it for years. Now, I am more of a research-backed guy. I've done bodybuilding, and I appreciate all the bodybuilding antics, or systems. Not all of them are inherently perfect, and they're not always what the bodybuilders thinks they are. So there are still bodybuilders to this day that will believe that you will lose more body fat if you're doing it in a fasted state, but there's no evidence of it. Other than what, Dane would say, is like, well, look at their physiques. It's like, but they could get those physiques even without it. And there's many bodybuilders that get great physiques without any cardio. So it's just a matter of, it's a tool of adherence. And I'm not against someone who likes waking up and doing cardio. I think that's great because you like it and it gets it done. I am a fan of morning cardio, but I don't do it every day. When I was in my bodybuilding competition, I did it more routinely more because it was for that mission. I think this is just where we're going to have some differences. He has a heavy bodybuilding influence. And so he has rules and systems that are aligned with those practices. And I've used some bodybuilding tactics for sure. But I think my philosophy and just my background has a lot more flexibility within it. For example, the pre-workout food. He describes it as being something that will feed that workout. Now, I just don't think that's inherently true because it'll feed your mind during that workout. When you go to eat food, say protein and carbs, the protein's not doing anything necessarily for that workout, but it's starting you to get your protein number up. It's not a bad habit. I want to address all of his habits are not bad. I'm just saying that there's more flexibility in it. The carbohydrates would not be absorbed by the muscle. The carbs would be absorbed after. So usually, or the way the body works is that muscle glycogen stores happen the day prior. So with whatever carbs you have the day prior would actually feed that workout, especially if it's only a 60-minute workout. Now, if you go longer than 60 minutes, you're going into an hour to hour and a half. That's where pre-workout carbs or intra-workout carbs would actually be beneficial. So again, it's not that it's bad. This is the difference that I have in my philosophy. But if someone says, I want to get my workout done, but I don't feel good, doing it on an empty stomach, pre-workout food sounds like a great plan. So there's nothing wrong with that. The other differences I want to highlight is that I don't believe seed oils are evil. I think that they're not as inflammatory as people try to make them out to be. But what he had mentioned, what he was eating previously was he was eating a lot of seed oils and Chick-fil-A. Was like, well, the Chick-fil-A, I think we can say, is a problem. Seed oils are commonly just in restaurant foods. I've heard someone say this before. Mark Bell said, we don't got to call them seed oils, call them restaurant oils because the restaurants using them. And I've heard people try to make this argument of, Five Guys is using seed oils to cook their fries. Yeah, what would make any difference? You deep fry them in olive oil and they're going to be inherently better? They're deep fried fries. Like, we know these are high calorie, hyperpalatable foods. It doesn't matter if it's seed oils. But let's say someone has an otherwise really healthy calorie deficit, but on their salad, they use the seed oil. There's no evidence that this would actually yield more inflammation or prevent fat loss. So again, this is where we're inherently different. He has a hard rule to not have seed oils. Well, that just eliminates all processed food. That's great. But we could just address that as being the processed food and not necessarily the seed oils. Salt's another one. He believes that the salt should just be added Himalayan salt. There's no evidence that states that Himalayan salt is inherently healthier. Some people will argue that there's microminerals. There is microminerals. There's such a little difference in it. I actually have Himalayan salt all the time because I like the taste. So it's not that it's bad. It's just that I think we see things a bit different because of his background. And I totally respect his overall message. His message is getting people to have pillars of non-negotiables that will yield a result. And if you're willing to do a system, I have no doubt that that system would get results. 5 days a week of training and cardio and, every single day showing up for a meal plan, I think it's a system that can work. But as I did mention, 9 out of 10 people, 95% of people do not sustain. So if you get into a system like Dane has and you embrace it and you like it and you can keep it long-term, I think it's a great plan. But I can understand why not everyone can sustain these routines. And that's why in my program, and this is just where I'm pointing out the difference respectfully, is that I have more flexibility in whether it's the pillars or inherently the food choices, because I do think that there is more even data again that flexibility, flexible dieting, and all these things have better long-term adherence. And Dane's system's working for Dane. He said the same food for 18 months. I haven't had the same food for 18 months. And I like my diet a lot. The thing that we have common denominators are probably protein intake and all that, but we both like our diets a lot, and we're sustaining good fitness long term. So the big thing I think everyone should have, and we both in agreement on this, is that you got to embrace your lifestyle long term. It's creating these habits that's going to be who you are. It's your diet long term. So you want to structure things in a way that you're going to want to show up for it routinely, because this is just who you're becoming, right? And I believe that a diet evolves constantly. It's not that your diet is going to be, in Dane's case, it is. He's had the same diet for 18 years or for 18 months. Who knows if he's going to alter it slightly over time. I have a very similar diet, but it's always kind of changed, change the food types, change the food timing. And I'm open to that. And my diet, I think, is actually improving over time. I'm discovering what foods I digest better. And I think you should think about your own diet that way. This is my diet now. And what me and Dane both use is systems of food choices. We know the macronutrients of each of these different food types. We routinely cycle the same food types. And that's what I think more people need to do, is just optimize your food types that you routinely rely on, get the protein number in each of these foods, and plan this ahead of time. I guarantee you that Dane plans ahead of time. He knows his food ahead of time. And I know my food ahead of time. So if you can optimize planning ahead of time and then slowly start to build in maybe new food types, maybe you have 3 or 4 different breakfasts, 3 or 4 different lunches, 3 or 4 different suppers that you know can get you to where you want to be, then you're going to be with the physique and lifestyle that you want. So I hope you learned a lot from this episode. As you can see that he comes from one of the bodybuilding, so you get to hear a different kind of description. But again, I'm just going to highlight that there's some great lessons there, and I hope you take those lessons with you. Discover your own non-negotiables, discover your own pillars, and get in a system that's going to optimize your health. As we both mentioned, choose your suffering so that you can, be proud of the person that you're becoming. Choose the mission that you want to be on, because without it, you're not going to feel that purpose. And you're not going to feel that happiness, because you and I both know life is not about the pursuit of happiness, but rather it's about the happiness within your pursuit. And I'll catch you next time.